Hello everyone, I'm Andrea from Andrea Flipping Unique. Welcome back to my channel, and if you're new here, thanks for joining. So you might have caught a glimpse of this table in my previous video because I was using it to mix my toner on, and that's where all of these lovely brown stains are from. I went to my Goodwill one morning when it first opened, and this was the first piece of furniture I saw. I saw that it was poorly painted and mid-century modern, so I ran over and snagged it. Now, I'm sure there's a few of you scratching your head wondering why I would even pick this up because, let's be honest, it looks really disgusting. However, poorly painted vintage furniture is some of my favorite, and I love taking a gamble and seeing if there's good wood underneath this paint. So continue watching to see if spending $6.99 on this piece of furniture was a good or a bad idea. So like I said before, I was using this table to mix my toner on, and I made a complete mess of the top, so I wiped it down and I also removed the sticker. And I don't know about anybody else, but I feel like these stickers and the ones from TJ Maxx are the absolute worst to try to get off. The next thing I did was grab my carbide scraper and started removing all of the paint from the top. I'm not gonna lie, I really didn't have high hopes with this working on this paint, and I did have my heat gun ready to go, but to my surprise, this paint came off very easily. I was starting to get really excited at this point because one, the wood that I was seeing was looking like it was in really good condition, and two, this top was actually solid wood and not wood and veneer like I thought it was. After I got all of the paint removed from the top, I then took my orbital sander and started sanding off the remaining finish with 120 grit sandpaper. When I first bought this table, I was thinking the wood underneath was teak. However, when I was removing the finish, I quickly realized that that was not the case. I still wasn't quite sure what the wood was, and it wasn't until I started sanding that I started to reveal this crazy grain pattern, and it reminded me of a pair of nightstands that I did that had elm veneer on it, and I was thinking that that's what this wood was. After posting the tabletop in my stories on my Instagram, I had a bunch of people DM me saying how much they loved elm, and it confirmed my suspicions. There was a bit of a curve on the edge of the table, so I added my foam pad to my orbital sander and then sanded that down. After the top was mostly sanded, I flipped it over to start to work on the base. I started off by removing the leg brass caps, which there were only 3 of, but I wasn't really too concerned, and I was really confident that I was going to be able to find a replacement. I then unscrewed the base from the top. And pro tip for anybody who is just starting out, make sure that if you have to flip your furniture upside down, that you put it on a towel. Otherwise, you might get dents and scratches in your wood. And yes, I am speaking from experience. I have found that sometimes vintage furniture does need to be put together exactly the way it was taken apart. So to avoid any confusion, I did mark letters in the holes on the bottom of the tabletop and on the top of the legs to correspond with each other to make sure that I put them back exactly the way they came apart. I also decided at the very last minute just to disassemble the whole entire base so that it was easier for me to remove the paint and to sand. Getting that base fully disassembled was a little bit of a struggle, but I eventually got it. And after I was finished with that, I went back to the top and started removing all of the paint that was on the underneath of it. I then went back to the base and removed all of the paint with my carbide scraper and then sanded off any remaining finish. When I was scraping and sanding the legs, I was still really confident I was going to find a replacement brass cap, so I didn't bother doing anything with the very bottom of them. I did start off sanding with 120 grit sandpaper, and then I moved to 150 and then 180. Always check the directions of the stain that you're using as to what sandpaper grit you should stop with. The one that I use says to stop sanding at 180 grit, but some say to go up to 220. But just remember that the higher the grit you use, the more your wood grain is going to close and the less your stain is going to absorb into the wood. I also was using my foam attachment on my orbital sander when I was doing the legs and the dowels. And again, I did not do anything with the very bottom of the legs because I was very confident I was going to be finding a replacement brass cap. Are you starting to hear the sarcasm in this? I still had a few areas that paint was stuck in and I couldn't get it out with my carbide scraper or my sander, so I grabbed these little dental picks and used those instead. I got these at Harbor Freight. I believe it was a pack of 5 for $2 or $3. If you don't have a Harbor Freight near you, I know that you can also get these online. And I'm sure there were a few of you who caught this little bit of paint and wondering if I was going to remove it, and yes, of course I did. If you didn't see my last video, I used the new concentrated stain tints from We Refinish to tint my wood putty, and I loved it so much that I decided to do it again. I knew I was going to be staining this table on the darker side, so I decided to use Royal Walnut. I mixed up my wood putty first and then added a little bit of the stain and then mixed it up again and applied it to my wood like normal. I'm still trying to play around with my ratios, and this did come out a little bit darker than I would have liked it, so I think next time I'm going to use just a little bit less. There wasn't too much damage to this table except for these two corners, which I'm pretty sure a little dog had chewed on them, so I ended up having to put the wood putty on and just reshaping them a little bit. After the putty was fully cured, I then sanded it down so it was flush with the rest of the wood. After everything was fixed and sanded, it was finally time to move on to stain. And this is the first time that I actually can't tell you what I used. And it's not because I don't want to, or I'm gatekeeping, or I have some super secret color. It's because I literally can't. The stain that is in this jar is leftover stain from previous projects and little samples that I had made when I was testing out colors. And I didn't want to waste it, so I just poured it all into this jar and was saving it for a project just like this one. After I let the stain dry, I did go over it with some high grit sandpaper because it did make the grain reach just a little bit. After that, I moved on to top coat and I used Behr's water-based polyurethane and semi-gloss. I also had to open up a new pack of rollers, and if anybody was curious, these are the ones that I use, and I will have these linked down below. After the first coat had dried, I lightly sanded it with 400 grit sandpaper and then did a second coat. After my second coat of top coat had dried, I then moved on to color matching. Two of the most common questions I get when it comes to color matching is, should I color match to the raw wood or the stain, and should I do it before or after top coat? So the answer to those questions is you want to color match to your end result. So it doesn't matter if you're staining or leaving the wood raw or even paint washing. Make sure that you do that first and then add your top coat. You never want to color match before your top coat because the top coat will always alter the color. After my corners were color matched, I looked at everything and it still wasn't rich enough for me in color, so I decided to use the We Refinish Wipe On Polyurethane in Dark Walnut, and I did 4 coats. This is a wipe-on water-based polyurethane with a slight tint to it, so the more you use, the deeper it will get in color. The Wipe On Poly toner does come in a satin finish, and the more I looked at it, the more I realized that I really liked it on this table. So I decided not to do any more additional coats with the semi-gloss and just go ahead and start reassembling everything together. Also, if you're screaming at your device right now and calling me an idiot for attaching these middle brackets to the legs first before I had put the dowels in, yeah, just continue doing that, because I realized after the fact that I was a complete moron and made this way harder than it needed to be. I definitely should have assembled the middle section first and then attached the legs. So yes, what I'm doing here was dumb. Remember that brass cap that I was so confident that I was going to find? Well, yep, you guessed it, I didn't. I looked all over the internet for this particular size and it was just nowhere to be found. So I tried to find longer ones that were skinnier, and these legs still weren't thick enough to hold them, and I ended up having to scrap that idea. Just like how I tell everybody to drill your hardware holes before you paint and make sure that your hardware fits, make sure that you can find a brass cap to fit your leg before you stain and seal your piece. It wouldn't have been a huge deal to me except for the fact that these legs had this ledge on it so that when you had placed the cap onto the leg, everything was flush, and I hated how it looked without it. I did get some suggestions to maybe paint them gold or use rub and buff, but I know myself, and if I had done that and looked at the final product, I would have ended up sanding them anyway because of the fact that they weren't real. So I ended up sanding the ledge down and tried to stain and top coat and tone with the rest of the leg, but I could see exactly where I had resanded, and I hated that as well. So I ended up doing what any sane person would do, and I took the table apart, I re-scraped and sanded and stained and top coated and toned so that everything looked cohesive. Before I show you what it looks like now, here is a quick reminder of what it looked like before. And to remind you to hit that like and subscribe button if you want to see more furniture flips, restorations, and the occasional DIY. And here's what it looks like now. Although I'm still a little bummed out that I couldn't find a leg cap replacement, I still think this table turned out incredible. And looking at it now, I still can't believe that this wood was underneath that paint. So I hope that you were able to learn something today, or maybe get a little inspired to do your own furniture makeover. And like always, thank you for watching. Be respectful in my comments, and I'll talk to y'all soon.